Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good day, good time zone. Happy things. Welcome, everyone. I just hit start and the attendee list just blew up, so that is awesome. And we are still seeing that number climb. So we'll just give everyone just a moment to join, and then we'll get started. Feel free to use the Q&A for any Q&A that you might have as we're going through this. And our goal for this is to basically go over some of our insights that we've seen over the course of this season of CPTC and the regional events, give you some feedback on what we've seen, give you all a chance to do Q&A. And then we'll also let you know who the wildcard winners are and who's going to finals. And then we'll have a quick summary of next steps for everyone who's going to be going to finals. On my end here, I am talking to everyone live from Cleveland, Ohio area. We also have Meredith off to the side. She's the hand on the side of the screen. Raul, you're coming from Texas?
Yes.
Nice.
Great
Probably
state of Texas.
probably warmer there than it is for us right now. Today is just a rainy day here in Ohio.
It's in the 80s. It's nice.
Mm-mm. How about you, Marshall? What's it like over there for you?
It was a balmy upper 40s today.
So you're getting the same weather we have here in Ohio.
Yeah.
And you got someone coming in from Amman, Jordan, 1 a.m. We appreciate you being here with us at that time. Sorry that this is a terrible time for you right now, but unfortunately, we have to work during the day sometimes, as much as we don't always want to. So I've seen the list start to slow down for people joining, so we spent a couple minutes. Let's fire away so that we don't leave people waiting. So, welcome to our wildcard announcement. We want to start by thanking our sponsors again. Raul or Marshall, do you want to do the honors for this? Because I always do it.
Sure.
Okay, take it away.
So, as many of you know, IBM has been a part of CPTC since the very beginning. So, just want to give a special shout out to our premier sponsor, IBM Security. Again, if it weren't for them, we honestly would not be where we're at today.
That is for sure.
Our next great sponsor is Black Hills. Last year they did a lot. This year they did just as much. Unfortunately, they weren't able to attend the regionals like they usually do, but hopefully, they're able to invest more time and resources to come out and provide students more resources is what it is. They've done a really great job. If you haven't, sign up for their Discord. I believe I'm definitely on it, but I think they do like at least a monthly basis. They'll do live Q&As, things of that nature. So definitely go check them out on Discord. I believe the Discord's on their main website, so go check it out if you haven't. Lots of good resources there.
I'm also using their shirt from last year right now, so a lot of you might have that.
I'll leave this one up to you.
Okay, well, my employer, Hurricane Labs here, they have a lot of folks that help support CPTC and have helped me be a part of the competition since the beginning. We do managed security services focused around Splunk and do a lot of the monitoring for CPTC as well. And Meredith also from HL, among other people. We are looking for interns. If you're interested in SOC type roles or Splunk administration, pen testing, reach out to us. Development as well. So a lot of different opportunities, and we've hired a lot of great interns who have become full-time employees, including Meredith, who was an intern who also went through CPTC. So turn it back to you, Raul.
Thanks, Tom. And last but not least, Alpha Virtual have been a sponsor for a long time. Really appreciate them for everything that they do for us, and hope they can keep helping us out. Oh, and I couldn't forget our supporting sponsors. So these are some other sponsors that help us out. We have Adobe. I always forget is it LZT Tech? Apologize if I'm butchering that. One
It's
of our
IZT.
IZT. Okay, the I is misleading because it looks like it goes into the Z. Doesn't matter. IZT Tech, always super helpful. Ventive and Battelle doing a lot of the research. Aventive is actually Austin's company, if I remember correctly. So not only do they help us by supporting Austin, as well as other folks, but same thing with Adobe. They don't just provide us resources or financial resources to keep the competition going, but they also give us the manpower to keep things moving forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of the teams found that they were able to move the ship around in weird random places during the event. The person who built that interface is actually from IZT Tech. So,
That's right, Charles.
yep. And then we'll
So if you had fun with that, you make sure to give Charles a thanks at finals.
yeah, for sure.
Volunteer sponsors. So, like I mentioned before, our organizations provide us the flexibility to be able to, take time away from work to come and put the competition together. So these are some of the organizations. We got Salesforce, we got PlaneSense, Ladder, Security Risk Advisors or SRA, AWH. We got folks from the Federal Reserve, from Crow, Peraton, and Global Atlantic. Oh, I forgot. I forget that we do our regional hosts. And special thanks to our regional hosts. Like honestly, if it wasn't for a regional host, like we really couldn't have regionals. We'd have to do everything virtual, which is not always the most fun. Um, I'm sure folks would love getting learning opportunities from from Zoom versus in person, but if it weren't for our regional hosts, we wouldn't be able to do the competition like we do. These are our regional hosts, right? So RIT Dubai, the University of Jordan this year, Baldwin Wallace, um, Tennessee Tech, Augusta, Cal Poly, University of New Haven, and Stanford.
Yeah, thanks, Raul. And hopefully everyone appreciates hearing someone else's voice from me than doing that. So appreciate that. So our goal in CPTC has always been education. We recognize that it's a competition. Teams want to win, they want to get that trophy. But from our perspective as educators and professionals, we want you to leave this event learning something new and have skills that you can apply to the real world. And we want to kind of take a little bit of this opportunity on this webinar to talk about some of the things that we've learned and some of the stuff we've learned from you, and also some of the things that we see as areas of improvement or things where we think you can learn as a result of what we see in regionals. So I'm going to turn it over to Meredith real quick to talk a little bit about our registration data since you and I tag teamed a lot of that this year.
Yeah,
So.
thanks, Tom. I just pulled some fun, quick stats as we were preparing for the webinar here. So we had all 7 regions full for the first time ever, which is absolutely amazing, with a wait list as well for every single region. The region that ended up with the most regional diversity, doing our best to accommodate everybody on all of the wait lists, was Great Lakes. They had folks from Central, they had folks from Southeast, they had folks from SoCal, which was really, really awesome to see. The longest travel distance award goes to a team who ended up at the Great Lakes region, the University of North Texas, at over 1,400 miles, traveling from Texas to sunny, rainy, questionable Cleveland, Ohio. In terms of most tickets sent during the competition, that went to the New England region. That was really cool. That was over 200 tickets. The fastest region to fill up was the SoCal region, So that's some good data for folks who are in the SoCal area next year. The earlier you submit, the less likely chance there is that you will be on the wait list. The region that ended up the most waitlisted was the central region. And so we had a lot of those teams redirected to different areas, just to make sure that we could accommodate as many teams as possible. And then last but not least, the last regional submission that we received, I think 5 or 6 days before the competition began, for all of the regional events was a team from West. So that's just something interesting to note.
They were on the wait list at that point.
They were on the wait list at that point, yes.
So don't try to submit 5 days before. You will probably not get a spot. But if a team dropped out and you were the team that were there, we'll find a way to make you compete or allow you to compete, because that's what we're all about. So that kind of ties into some of the questions we get. I guess a first one, this is less specific about registration, but the whole group, you can kind of talk about this a little bit. But there's some feedback that we had about attack paths not being clear. And I think that's exactly the lesson we want to convey, is that when you walk into an environment to do a pen test, there's not a defined attack path. We don't define an attack path, and we don't expect you to be looking for a certain, like, this is one thing that you find that gets you to this, that gets you to this. I guess the other guys on the call, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just to echo what Tom was mentioning, like when you go in, you don't know. Well, it depends on the type of pen test, but here we're assuming black box, right? So we don't know anything about the environment. The only people that know are those that build it, which is myself. So this is not a CTF where you can kind of climb a ladder. It's really what you find is what you get, right? Sometimes you will find domain creds in a share, or sometimes you'll find a misconfigured printer, or it every environment is different. So definitely don't go in it with the mindset of, oh, I know exactly how I'm going to elevate privileges. I'm going to do this, do that, get DA, and start compromising the rest of the network. But that's not a feasible tactic to leverage when you're performing these assessments. Like you really got to go in with an open mind. Go in, do your Nmap scans where the scope allows, figure out what's on the network, and then go from there.
Yep, that's a great way to put it, Raul. And I know sometimes that's a little bit of a change for people that are used to like a CTF, but that's why CPTC is different. One of the other questions we got, and Meredith, you kind of touched on that already. Why are there teams from other regions here? Like Great Lakes, for example, had teams from Texas and Florida. Why do we do that? Well, from our perspective, we want to make sure that teams have the opportunity to compete. If a region only has 10 spots and you have, in some cases, we had 15 or 16 teams from a region that wanted to be able to be there, we worked to figure out travel for those teams and get teams to regions where there were space. And that's how we got all 70 slots available this year. So that's one of the things, like, you might think, well, is this fair? And yeah, that's why we're doing the wild card. So that if there is a region that is dominated by one school that consistently gets first place, we don't want it to feel like there's no point in competing in that region because some team is always going to win. You always have a chance. All the regions have the same index, the same environment, the same interactions. Everything is the same across all the events, and we do the same people scoring. So it's a consistent experience for everyone and allows us to evaluate all the teams consistently. Now, we also had questions for the New England regional. We had one team that ended up competing remotely, and people were like, why is this something that's allowed? We didn't know this was an option. Well, in all fairness, it wasn't an option. It was an option that ended up being thrown at us at the last minute because the United States government decided to not be available for providing travel for the school that was associated with the United States government. I'll be broad about that. But that was an extenuating circumstance. They reached out to us a couple days before the event saying, hey, we have no ability to travel because we can't get funding. And we're like, we want to make you have the opportunity to compete. That's not something that's on you. Let's make it work. So we worked with the team. We had remote proctors to handle same sort of everything for that team. We couldn't see them there in real life, but that's not an option we want to have to do. But it's something that we pivoted, and if your team was in the same situation, we would think that you would want the same sort of grace given to you.
Yeah, Tom, can I say a couple things about, I guess, each one of these points?
Yeah.
Yeah, so to start off on, I'll start with that last point. So I saw some of this feedback and kind of stuck out to me that I don't know who gave the feedback, but I think it's important to keep empathy in mind for the students for students that aren't able to come in person for things like this. Obviously, they didn't want this. And we worked, oh, that's my cat. We worked with them so they were able to compete. And you have to think, what would you want if the same thing happened to you? We went through COVID and we had similar things that we had to do. We had to work around issues like that. We've worked around hurricanes before and other natural disasters. So just try to keep empathy in mind when you're competing in this. I know tensions get high and you want to win and you think it might be advantage. It's really not advantage. It's better to be there in person. But we wanted this team to be able to compete because there's literally nothing they could have done. Um, so just try to keep that in mind. And about the attack paths. So Rule gave some really good commentary about that. I think that a lot of the individuals that are giving feedback on attack paths, I think they come in and they expect to maybe get DA or kind of have like this sort of CTF-esque, you own this and then you jump to this and this and this. That's not what a real pen test is like. Um, Real pen tests, sometimes you just don't find a lot of stuff also. And you have to keep that in mind that you're not going to get DA every time. You're probably not going to get DA a lot if you're working for a large corporation that works with people who care about security. Of course, you're going to probably get DA a lot versus companies that maybe don't care as much. But don't let that discourage you. Um, when your job is to find all vulnerabilities and disclose them to the client and to properly inform them of the risk of these vulnerabilities. So if you don't get DA, you got to get used to that, right? Don't take it as a failure or anything.
Yeah, thanks, Marshall. I appreciate that. Let's go on. And I think, Greg, you can talk about educational opportunities, all that, and inject feedback.
Yes, yeah. So this will be the next few slides. So I'm coming to this conversation from the scoring side of the volunteer house, and thought it'd be a good place to start at the top with what we call educational opportunity penalties. So that's for folks who may not have heard that jargon before. You're, I think familiar as competitors that there are lots of different ways in which you're being evaluated in the competition, and sometimes when it is needed, your client or us role playing as your client will interact with you to follow up about something that happened during the engagement. And on our side, we call this an educational opportunity, and it usually results in some sort of penalty to your score. Although we do build in the way that we evaluate this, a lot of opportunity for you to minimize the penalty by handling your client interaction during the EO. That's what we call them for short, EOs. If you handle the EO as a team well, the penalty is very minimal, but it starts at like a maximum penalty assigned for the type of infraction or error that you committed with your client, and then how you engage with your client when they address it with you, it determines how many points you kind of win back, right? So the bullet points here on the slide are just three big takeaways to help avoid incurring educational opportunities and maximize the number of points you earn back when you find yourself in the situation where you're undergoing one. So the first one here is that by far the most common EO that we saw during the competition was uploading of client data to an LLM. So this is going to be a good lesson to learn in this competition environment because all over the world right now people are running afoul of this, data privacy constraint with their client data, and it's really important lesson to learn. We tried to enforce this, pretty rigorously during the competition. So this happened, I want to say maybe in every region we had a team who slipped up in this way. So it's a good thing to be aware of if if you were one of the teams who didn't suffer from this EO. Take the opportunity to learn from it so you don't have the error happen at finals or moving forward in your career. And if it happened to you, this was something that was pretty common across the board and it, not unexpected, right? These are new tools we're all getting familiar with. They're very convenient. It's really easy to expose client data to an LLM inadvertently and violate the scope of your engagement. So try to avoid that. Once you're in a situation where a client has expressed dissatisfaction with some action you've taken or believes that you may be at fault for something that they're dealing with, it's really important when you're interacting with the client not to downplay or dismiss your client's concerns. Okay, this is something that we see every year. There are teams who take themselves off the medal stand or really negatively impact their score by I'm going to struggle with my vocabulary there. Engaging with their clients in an adversarial manner. You know, there's the old adage, the customer's always right, right? Everyone's heard that probably, hopefully. When you're working with your client, this is someone, no matter where they're coming from, if you think they're in the wrong or you think they're hypersensitive about something or you think what happened wasn't that big a deal, it's really important to have your client walk away from their interaction with you with, a enhanced feeling of trust in your competency and how much you care about them and their organization. So if you're on the call right now and you can recall during the regional competition interacting with the volunteers who are role playing as your client and trying to kind of argue with them about how what they thought was a big deal really wasn't a big deal, you lost your team points unnecessarily and you engaged in a style of interaction with your client that isn't going to serve you well in your career. So we try to have these elements of the competition to help you get the most real world experience that we can create for you as students so that when you get out in the real world, you ace these interactions. So if you ever find yourself engaging in an adversarial way with the person who's signing your paycheck or signing your boss's paycheck, you have messed up. Don't don't do that. And in the context of the competition, you'll hurt yourself from a score perspective. Okay. And then the last bullet point here is just, follow the competition rules. They're put out there. You can always ask a question proactively if you're unsure about whether something you want to do is allowed within the competition rules. We had some challenges in various parts of the competition with teams leaving their competition room in violation of the rules and just stepping outside of the bounds of the competition rules, and that's obviously going to incur a penalty. So if you follow all the rules, if you make a mistake inadvertently and you handle the client interaction well, you're going to have a minimal penalty to your score. And so there's a lot under your own control with this stuff. Okay. And feel free to ask questions in the Q&A about that aspect of things. I'm happy to expand more on it. Now I want to take the opportunity to
Hey, Tom or Greg, can I just say one thing about that? Can you go back one
please? Yeah.
slide? Yeah, so with the LLMs putting information into LLMs, you might ask yourself, why is this such a bad thing, right? It's a big company, you can trust them or whatever. First of all, no, you can't, because they're using that to train stuff. But recently there was a court case that essentially it was against OpenAI, and they gave them they released all of the chat information that it was like 200 million messages to just some random person because there's a court case and they got subpoenaed and they had to turn over all those messages. So if you put your client data into ChatGPT, now this random person that's suing the company that you put their data into has access to it. And this just happened like a couple weeks ago. So don't trust the big corporations, first of all. And secondly, there can be tertiary things where you're leaking this information. If it's very sensitive, you don't know who's going to be able to access it in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Marshall. And I would say also follow competition rules, but make sure you review the competition rules. There was some feedback that we saw in the survey about publish the rules earlier or something like that. The current rules were actually from 2024, so we didn't make any changes for this year. So there were no changes at that. So I'm not entirely sure where that came from, but we do try to communicate that to everyone. Greg, I'll head it back to you for inject feedback.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I want to talk through each of the injects that we had during the regional competition and what sort of things we were looking for to get an optimal score on them. And, there will be elements of these that are applicable for finals and future years of competition, and hopefully just in general when you're interacting with your client, in the real world. So that's why I want to take the time to talk through these. Okay, so for the first inject of the competition, that was the business email compromise inject. You were asked to generate a lure for the All Ports Tours finance department and test whether, you could engage them with a lure in a way that would cause them to commit a fraudulent, transaction. So the first bullet point here, target your lure towards the specific target your client requested. So most teams did this, but a lot of teams made it a little bit broader than what the client asked for. So we were looking when evaluating these for, did you actually target your lure towards the client's finance department as opposed to just the client broadly, or just something that doesn't even reference the client in the lure? Okay. The second bullet point here is, understand the test your client asked for. So, and in parentheses there, I said, business email compromise versus a low-level scam. A number of teams had pretty good like phishing lures, but they were for, hey, I'd like to refund my ticket, or something that was on the scale for the transaction that was pretty small potatoes. And if you really understand what the client's asking you to test here, which is this larger threat of business email compromise. If you took a moment as a competitor, if you hadn't heard that term business email compromise before, but you did a Google search real quick, you could see that there's a long history of organizations, being lured into committing fraudulent transactions on the scale of like millions of dollars in some cases. So this is kind of the scale of the scenario that your client was getting at. And if you have any kind of question about that, it's totally appropriate in response to an inject to ask your client for clarification if you're unfamiliar with what they're asking for. Really make sure you understand what your client's requirements are, because if you filled out, your phishing test here with something that really didn't meet the scenario that the client had in mind, that was going to result in a suboptimal score. And then the last bullet point here was, use additional elements to enhance lure convincingness. For example, a fake invoice, a fake email history, etc. Many teams did this, and they were great. Lots of fake invoices out there. Saw a couple of fake email histories. But if you had a lure that was just kind of only the body of the individual email with no additional elements that kind of enhance the convincingness to the reader, that was going to give you, again, a suboptimal score. So, and most teams understood the general premise of what's a good phishing email. They included some element in the language of the email that heightened the urgency, or described a scenario that would prompt the client to engage in some rash action. So across the board, we were pretty good on that. But these were the three, kind of takeaways where we saw some variation in how teams handled their inject number one. And again, if you have any questions as I'm going through these, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we can address them, I guess, at the end. But if you have any follow-up questions on these, please let me know. Okay, the second inject that you had during the competition was a request from your client to identify from your perspective who they should be worried about attacking them, and what were the 5 types of attacks that they need to be most worried about. So some bullet points here for, things that, would help you get an optimal score on this type of inject. Number 1, name specific actors your client needs to worry about. So this was surprisingly rare. We only had a handful of teams who kind of hit the, envisioned submission for this, which was to name a specific threat actor group or groups that you think are most likely to target the client. We had a broader set of competitors identify kind of classes of threat actors, like, hey, you really need to worry about nation state actors, or you really need to worry about, opportunistic cyber criminals, or you really need to worry about hacktivist groups, or some variation, within those. But what we were really looking here from the client's perspective was for you to tell them, hey, we know who targets your type of organization. You're in the maritime sector, you're in the hospitality sector. These, from what we see in the open source, are the groups that are most active in this space. And it would be also great to, bundle them into a description of that higher level class of threat actor, like, cyber criminal groups are who we think you most need to worry about, and these are the cyber criminal groups most active against maritime and hospitality sectors that we know of, right? But some teams just altogether kind of dodged that part of the question and didn't mention anything, and a broader set said, something kind of generic and high level. But we were really looking for specific actors there. And again, if you're unsure what your client wants, you can always reach out with a follow-up question. Okay, sort of speaking to the second part of that inject, that hey, what are the 5 types of attacks we need to be most worried about? Um, the recommendation here is understand the difference between a threat vector and a vulnerability. So a lot of teams just sort of listed like secure passwords or segment networks or things that are very important elements of cybersecurity. But what the client was really looking for here is what do these specific bad guys you think we need to worry about do so that we can start building our defensive posture around those threat vectors and types of attacks. So there was a lot of conflation in that section between kind of threats and vulnerabilities. And if you could name, specific types of attacks, we think ransomware, attacks are huge. Social engineering of the help desk is a really big type of attack that we think you need to worry about. Those are the types of things we're looking for. For those who are unfamiliar, the MITRE attack framework provides some pretty good kind of lexicon for types of attacks where you could just, I don't think we had a couple of teams that submitted like specific MITRE attack techniques, but that would have been a fine way to deal with this. But we were looking for specific like actions a threat actor would take that you think the client needs to worry about, as opposed to deficiencies in their attack surface or defensive posture that you think they need to guard against, although that's very important as well. We're also looking here in both the first and second section of this inject, for some justification of your assessment. So there was no penalty, there was no right or wrong answer there. If you think that the client needs to be most worried about state actors from Russia, or you think that the client needs to be most worried about cyber criminal groups, no, there was no right or wrong answer there, but you needed to provide some kind of justification. So when making that kind of list of the types of attacks or the threat actors, you need to provide some language for, why you think that those things warrant being focused upon to the exclusion potentially of other less likely, things that are a lower priority. And then 2 bullet points here at the bottom. You'll see these repeated for the other injects, but some teams really distinguish themselves by providing the client kind of like a PDF that was branded for their client, and mention their own team name in a prominent way versus just putting that reply as like a normal email body. So some guidance there moving forward. You can really distinguish yourself as in the marketplace by, if you elect to reply to your client in a format like a PDF where you can control kind of the branding of it, it really can look sleek and professional in a way that just sort of replying directly to the email doesn't. So if you weren't doing that, take advantage of that opportunity. A lot of teams, did have that in their toolkit, and it stood out just from putting yourself in the perspective of the client. What really makes you feel good, when your pen test team, gives you a reply to your question that's like really slick formatted and branded in a way that feels good. The other thing that I'll mention here is this inject was kind of more oriented towards the cyber discipline of cyber threat intelligence. And anytime I think you're in the real world and you get a question that's a little bit outside of your scope, like if you're an offensive, pen test person, you're being asked a little bit for something on the CTI side, you can always, if you're working for a consulting company that provides a whole complement of services, use the opportunity to ask the client, if they want to engage to expand the scope of the engagement so that you can bring on your SMEs for that discipline. So you could figure out, there are a million ways you could word that or do it, but something in this inject where you reply and say, this is our take on how to do this. But if you'd really like, we have a team that specializes in cyber threat intelligence, and we could bring them, together with you to do a full workup on this. Just a thought there. You can always use this kind of opportunity to plug additional services for your employer, and that can be a good career move. Okay. Again, happy to answer any more questions on that in the Q&A. For inject number 3, this was a sort of incident response scenario. We gave you a real screenshot of a CLOP ransomware extortion email that was really prominent only a couple weeks before the regional competitions opened. And we asked you, what do you think our CEO should do? He just got this extortion letter. And this was a fun one to grade because teams took this in a lot of different directions. So the first recommendation here for this type of inject is to consider acknowledging like scope limitations. Okay. So if you're being asked about incident response and your skill set is, I'm a pen tester, it doesn't mean that you just like shut the client down. And a couple teams did this, and I was sad to see that because I know we provided some prior guidance to like, stay within your lane. You still want to give your best effort for the client, but it's good to acknowledge, hey, this is an incident response scenario. you know, we have some people, in our consulting company who specialize in this area. We can put you in contact with them. But this is outside of the scope of what we normally do on an engagement. That being said, here are our recommendations, right? That's the kind of thing we're looking for. One key step, a few teams hit on this, but a lot of teams didn't, is verify the incident as real, right? This scenario, if you took the inject prompt and you looked at the contents of that letter and you mapped it back to the actual real world campaign that was going on, you would have read that a lot of people were receiving these as part of a scam, right? So just because you receive an extortion email doesn't mean that you're actually a victim of a data breach, right? It could just be somebody trying to scare you into engaging with them. So if you advise the client to verify that the incident was real and that they actually used the affected, software in question, that was a great step. Some teams did, to their credit, look in the environment, saw no evidence of Oracle EBS, and then reported to the client, this is not real because we looked and you don't seem to have this. And I really love the impulse there to do that exposure check yourself, but you got to be mindful as well that you may not be seeing all of the client's environment. So it's risky to advise a client that something is not an incident based on your kind of limited view in their environment. Although, so the right way to handle that would be to say, hey, we took a look, we didn't see that you were using this software, but you should go and confirm that that's in fact the case. And then there's a whole sequence of things that you can do if this is fake, including just ignore things. We're also looking in this inject reply for any kind of discussion here on the trade-offs of the different actions the client could take. So, we wanted you as the, security SME to evidence some appreciation for, hey, if you go and alert the FBI, that's one route that you could take that could have these consequences. If you decide to keep this in-house until you verify the extent of the data exposure, that's another, has another set of trade-offs associated with it. So we were looking for some discussion of, hey, this is what we recommend, but here's the upside and the downside of doing that. Okay. And then we were looking for you to justify those recommendations, right? There was no wrong answer, although, a number of teams did say like, hey, you should reply to the sender of this extortion email and ask for, verification of your data. And, that's not really like wrong, but it's a pretty risky thing to encourage your client to engage directly with a potential attacker when they're not, the expert in this. So better responses were, engage your cybersecurity insurance if you have it, to have them engage the attacker, or, bring on our team of incident response experts and we can help you deal with this negotiation. But any kind of justification was really what we were looking for. And then last two bullet points, same as before, providing this type of recommendation in a standalone PDF with some branding for the client is kind of a different customer service feel than just reading through this in like blocks of an email reply. And some teams did that and it really looks slick and looked good. So if your team doesn't do that currently, consider taking that as an action item for finals or for next year. And then of course you can, in this scenario, you could plug incident response services for your consulting company. All right.
Wait, before you switch, I'm going to hop in for 0.2 seconds with something that we had as a really good educational opportunity as well from the regional here. With this inject, there were some actual legitimate domains in there since, as Greg mentioned, we took a screenshot of what was a known ransomware gang's scam email. We had some teams attempt to take an offensive action against that. That is very, very out of scope, and that's something that, as professionals we always want to remind you of, but especially during the competition, when you are taking those actions, you're taking those from a different competition, network, the RIT infrastructure. So it looks like RIT is taking an offensive action against the threat actor. That's something that you always want to be cautious of, both, if you're taking an offensive action from a client environment, make sure that is something very, very within scope. In this case, it was not.
And it rarely would be. Greg, back
Yeah,
to you.
that one caught me by surprise when we saw it. But yeah, good lesson learned, I think, for that team. And thanks for bringing that up, Meredith. And I'll go through this last one quickly. I appreciate everyone's patience with these. Just trying to give you enough detail here to make the adjustments you need to perform better on these at finals or for the coming year. Okay, so the last inject you had was to provide your client with, your top 3 cybersecurity investments. The client mentioned they were going into a budget meeting and they wanted to know, based on what you'd seen during the engagement, what investments do you recommend? So the first bullet point here is understand what your client means by investment. A lot of people took a very broad understanding of investment when they made these recommendations, and they would say things like invest in zero trust, architecture, or invest in some sort of like fundamental cybersecurity principle, which was good advice. But what the client was really looking for here is, hey, I'm going into a budget meeting. What are my 3 budget line items that you think I should consider putting down? What is something that you can actually spend money on and incorporate into the budget? So teams that made these kind of broader recommendations for cybersecurity strategies rather than investment in the narrowest sense of the term didn't get the highest score there. And again, that's always something you can clarify with your client if you feel unclear on your side. And then we were also looking there for justification in those recommendations. So there was no like right or wrong answer necessarily if you provided a good recommendation. And so some teams really knocked this one out of the park by sort of grounding what they were recommending in things that they'd seen in the environment. So if you mentioned a specific, expenditure that was justified by vulnerabilities you'd identified in the environment, that was perfect. So something as simple, for example, as hey, we recommend that you invest in an EDR solution because we saw the following things during the engagement. Perfect, right? And so we're looking for the top 3 there. Okay, so that concludes all the review of all the injects. I think our next slide is just some feedback here on when you do your written report. We're not going to talk to technical findings here because that could be replayable in some extent during the finals, but on just your written reports, right? Advice here. Remember your audience for your executive summary. So you're looking for someone who's reading the executive summary for a reader that's trying to get all the information out with the minimal effort needed. Okay. One kind of sub bullet for that is try to reference the scope in the exec summary. Don't presume that whoever's reading your thing, particularly if that person's like very important and has a bazillion things to worry about, knows what the scope was. So you had a lot of teams, for example, that had a really well-developed kind of like scope section of the report, but no mention of the scope in the exec summary. So if I'm an executive and I'm reading it and I don't know that the specifics here and I don't have time to read the full report, I'm like, okay, here's a pen test report, but I don't know what they actually tested, right? So consider pushing that up, near the top of the exec summary so that anyone reading it without prior context understands like what you engaged. The third bullet point for there, remember your client's, business. That's, their what the business impacts, business outcomes of your recommendation are, and ground that in what their sector and customer base is. So teams really excelled when they could make a recommendation that was informed by, what the client's business is, or identify a business impact that was really specific to what the client's actual like operations are. Um, Fourth bullet point there, use summary tables wherever you can. So a lot of teams, I did wonderful work. You found a bazillion findings. If I'm reading your paper, I want to see a summary of your findings on a standalone page. I don't want to have to read through 40 pages of findings to get the takeaways, right? A lot of teams did use like a kind of findings summary table, but a lot of teams didn't, even though they had really high quality work done in building out these descriptions of all the findings that they had. So, please, use a summary table for your findings so your reader can extract the key takeaways as easily as possible. And then the last recommendation there is make your document like easy to navigate. So teams this is all subjective, right? But this is where I'm coming from a scoring standpoint. I want to be able, when I'm 30 pages into your 65-page report, to understand on that page what section I'm in and what, the theme of that section is. So teams that had kind of like numbered section headers, that was great. Teams that on the individual pages maintained like a section name and number somewhere on the page so that you could glance at that. That's really helpful. And little things there where you're just trying to look at your document from the perspective of a reader and make their experience with your document as pleasant as possible. A lot of this stuff is just comes back to like put yourself in your client's shoes and think about it from their standpoint. And if you're doing that regularly, you'll end up in a good place. Anybody else have any other report feedback? I know everybody on the call here has done a lot of grading of the reports as well. So any additional context there folks wanted to add?
No, I think you covered it.
Just one thing. We People have talked about this a bunch about proof for the technical findings. And it's really important that people include proof. Some people miss including it, and that causes issues. But the reason why we do it and why we do it for in the real world is so that they know what exactly it looks like. And also in the context of the competition, sometimes people find things we don't intend. So that really helps us be able to actually track down the issue. So it's kind of a twofold thing. There's a real world scenario, and then also for us. Because if someone says, "Oh, this vulnerability exists," and then there's no proof of it, it's like, does it exist? Because people do make things up. We've gotten things before where we're like, "Yeah, that's not a finding," and there's no proof for it because it didn't exist. So just make sure you're explaining the technical details really well, and specifically like how to recreate it, because this is super useful in the real world. I've been on both sides of it. Of if you receive a vulnerability report and the details are very vague and you can't reproduce it, you're wasting their time essentially. You want the retest notes or the evidence or something to specifically outline the steps you took and how to retest it, because unless you're internal and you can talk with them back and forth, they're not going to know how to, like, the developers aren't going to know how to retest it to see if the fix worked most of the time. So it's just really important that you include that information, because if you just say, hey, this thing exists, and you're not actually telling them how to fix it, and then how to retest it, you're not providing full value to them.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I wanted to touch a little just on the survey results that we had when we asked you all at each of your regional events for survey for or some feedback on the event. I have a couple of different slides for this, but just for the sake of time, I think we just want to cover one of them, which is what you all liked least. So we recognize, as much as we want CPTC to be perfect, we're not always perfect, and we always want to try to improve. People did run into some Wi-Fi issues at some of the regional events, especially on guest networks. So that's some feedback we'll take back to the regional host to see if we can provide more stable environments. Also, there were some issues with Greenbone and OpenVAS and all that, and we'll look at if that's a tool we want to provide or if it's worthwhile to have that extra overhead to make that something that exists. Time constraints. A lot of people felt like you didn't have enough time to write your reports. Also, that it was a really long day. We understand. We also have to work along the constraints of we can only have you so long physically at the event, and there's also issues potentially with use the time to write your report when you're collecting data during the assessment phase. So you don't have to start writing the report after you lose access to the environment. Also, there were some, speaking of Wi-Fi, one of the issues I know, like one region asked for MAC addresses and things ahead of time, and not every team collected that information, and that kind of was a little bit of a setback. So pay attention to your email just like you would for a customer. There were some logistical challenges, just like traveling to different places, being in small rooms. We understand not every regional host can have a perfect facility for CPTC, and not everyone can have a full big classroom. That's kind of just unfortunately something we have to deal with the regional hosts, but we have to be appreciative of all the resources that they give us. Sometimes there's some scheduling differences. So like when we're going back and forth between different time zones and things like that, sometimes there might be a miscommunication. So we try our best to eliminate those, but sometimes those do happen. And then there's some confusion around allowed tools. We're looking at potentially putting some more detail in the rules, potentially like a flow chart to help you make decisions on that. But as a general rule, we want to try to avoid rule or tools that are commercial and store data in the cloud. So those are some kind of the things that we want to at least highlight a little bit more so it's more clear for everyone. Scoring feedback. There's a question in the chat about this, but that's going to be released on Sunday night in the scoring portal. And that'll be the same place you logged in to get your credentials and submit your roster. So your captain or coach will be able to log in after that's released on Sunday night, close to midnight Eastern time. So realistically on Monday, you'll be able to see that. And if, that's all going to be stuff that'll be available to look at, save that, reference it, use that as something that you will be able to have as for your team to improve. And that's really going to be the most valuable part of everything that comes out of this. So we are getting close to the end of time. Q&A. I think we saw a couple questions that have come through, or if you've just handled everything in chat.
Everybody has.
Okay,
Teamwork.
perfect. Teamwork. Okay, so if you do have other questions that haven't been answered, we'll go ahead and use the Q&A. We'll stick around a little bit afterwards. But we said we were going to stick to around 50 minutes after for getting the announcement taken care of. So we are sticking to that schedule. So who wants to know who's going to finals?
I want to know if I'm going to finals.
Yeah, you're probably going to be there because we need the infrastructure to work.
I don't know. It works by itself sometimes.
Yeah. So should I hit next on the slide?
Let's do it.
Okay. Here we go. Without further ado, the 12 teams that are going to be at finals in alphabetical order. Al Hussein Technical University, Brigham Young University, California State Polytechnic University Pomona, Cal Poly Pomona for short, Dakota State University, Princess Samaya University for Technology, Rochester Institute of Technology, Stanford University, University of California Irvine, University of Central Florida, University of Florida, University of Massachusetts Amherst, and last but not least, University of New Haven. So all 12 of you will be at finals, and we're looking forward to seeing all of you. So if we just announce your school name, stick around for the next 5 minutes. We're going to tell you a couple critical things to look for in an upcoming email to make sure that you're able to compete. So I will turn it to you, Meredith, for that.
You keep going.
I'm going to keep. Okay. So finals prep for those of you that are going to finals. Couple key reminders. We're going to send an email to you in the next day or two. It's going to basically be your invite to finals. We need you to reply to that to acknowledge that you're going to be coming to finals and you intend to participate by next Wednesday at midnight. So that'll be a week from today, a little bit over a week, a couple hours more than a week from now. We just need a reply back that says, yes, your team's coming to finals. You're going to commit to do that. That's all we need in order to hold your spot. The next step for that, the following Monday on the 8th, we're going to need evidence of travel being booked. That's going to be either a plane ticket if you're flying into Rochester, or if you're within driving distance, some sort of rental van receipt from your university or however you're handling that. Some evidence that you're going to be doing that. We will be sending out a packet for finals similar to what you got for the regional event. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more detailed and a little bit different because of things being in Rochester, but that'll be your reference for what to expect there. If we do make any rules changes or anything like that, we will send out an email and a Discord notification to that so you can see everything. So that's the TLDR of what to expect for competing in finals. But I'm going to switch back to the list of all the teams, and we'll open the floor for any questions that anyone has. If not, we are looking forward to seeing all 12 of you in January. And for those of you that didn't make it, keep an eye out for the feedback. That'll be the best way to prepare and improve so that we can see you next year for CPTC 12.
Tom, would it make sense to touch a little bit on the visa info for those that are on the call from the
We'll
international
be
team?
for all that we'll be reaching out to you if there's a visa requirement because that's only going to apply to like one or two schools on this list.
Okay.
And we've already handled that for one of the schools. And wildcard spot, obviously that's going to be something that is a consideration too.
So if you are the other school on this list, you'll be receiving yet another email from me.
Now, in the event that a team says we aren't interested in coming to finals for some reason or doesn't fill these requirements, we'll be reaching out to the next teams on the wait list, not the wait list, but the next teams in the list. So it's still possible that you might have a chance. Last year we did pull a team because one team wasn't able to travel. So there's still a chance if you didn't actually see your name here, but if you look at like what schools placed above you, you might still have a chance.
We have a question around when do we need to be at RIT? I believe it starts on Friday, January 9th, 8 a.m.
Yes, but
registration is the 8th, but I got the question.
Yeah, we'll be sending out the packet for that and it'll give you details. Typically, the Thursday night is when we'll do team registration, make sure everyone's checked in. And then Friday morning, you usually get 2 days in the environment for finals and give presentations. That's another thing. If you're a team that hasn't been at finals before, there are presentations that are given at finals. So we have recordings on YouTube for that for you to look at from previous years, and also presentation examples on GitHub. So start prepping so that you are ready to do that.
I see there was also a question in chat there. Is there going to be a scoreboard or scores? I think Saif, you posed this question, and the answer is no. For CPTC, we do not post scores or a scoreboard. Again, that's kind of in keeping with our goal of trying to make this as relevant to your real world experience as possible. We want to make sure that you're going to get scoring feedback, and I've tried obviously here to provide a lot of detail in this presentation about what you can do to optimize your performance, and we do score it on the back end, but to avoid this kind of getting gamified in a sort of CTF style approach, it is something where we don't report specific scores out. So I hope that answers your question.
Does anyone else have any questions for our lovely group of volunteers?
And for the record, we have a director of infra, we have the director of apps as well. So if you have technical questions, we might be able, depending on what they are, we may or may not be able to answer them, but feel free to ask them and we can definitely do our best. Obviously can't disclose much, but we will see.
I am not seeing much, so I think we let people go on with their week. And for those of you in the United States, have a happy Thanksgiving. For those of you not in the United States, have a nice week or whatever you might be celebrating.
Such as Black Friday and
Oh,
shopping.
happy Black Friday on Friday.
The global holiday.
Yes, it is.
Oh, we do have a question. Find something out of scope and infra, does it count on the report?
No.
What does that mean? How would you find something out of scope?
I mean, I'm assuming they found something and it was just maybe so sometimes we'll use like open source tools or we'll use other tools that maybe have links to other things that are not within the environment. Those are definitely not in scope.
Yeah, you shouldn't be testing that stuff.
If there's ever a doubt in your mind of something being in scope,
Oh,
ask.
they asked if they put more context in. Yeah, that doesn't count. That's out of scope. You shouldn't be touching that stuff. If you come across it haphazardly, like just ignore it. Pretend it doesn't exist.
When in doubt, ask. Customer will always be able to lead you in the right direction in the case, especially in the case of CPTC.
Yeah, in the context that they're asking, sometimes when you dump creds, like the automated accounts and stuff are still on there. So um do you come across that? But yeah, you wouldn't include that in the report. But good question.
Yeah.
But if you open up Bash history, hit the up arrow key, and the domain admin password is in there from us setting it up, like that would never happen in CPTC ever. But in the unlikely event it does, that's totally a finding, and you can use it.
Yes.
But
That's fair game.
we've never done that ever.
Really?
Not even on purpose. It has been an accident when that has happened, and people have found it. And we're like, oh, I guess people have admin. That's cool. So, okay. I don't see any other questions. Thank you all for sticking around and enjoy the rest of your week and see a lot of you in January. And then if you don't see you in January, we'll see you next year. And if you graduate and we don't see you next year, we'll see you on the volunteer team. I think I covered all the bases.
Yes.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks all.
See you.